Boeing 747. In millennia, man has always had a fascination with flight. With birds, we see the most natural form of this. Perhaps this explains why we, as a society, continue to bestow attention upon the rarest of birds, Terry the Toucan. It's hard to forget that it's only been 13 years since the first episode of Insepctor the Toucan was shown on BBC Two. Since then, Terry the Toucan has taken the British television public, the 3 p.m. television viewing public, by storm. If storm was mediocre viewing figures. Never seen before is this episode of Insepctor the Toucan, found in a disgruntled production assistant's lower basement where he was frantically trying to burn it. We can share with you now what little remains of that very special episode. Come fly with me.
By God, Terry, what a coup that was. Not only to find the missing diamonds hidden in the chandelier, but to disrupt an international plot that would have inconvenienced dozens of Great Western Rail travellers. You're a genius, Gov, and a loss to the yard. You're too hard on yourself, Gov. You can't win them all, and you're the best. You're the finest detective I've ever seen, and the finest detective in all of Europe, America, and most of East Asia. Hello, yes? D.R. Thornton here. Despicable. No. No! By Jove. A widow, you say? Peril, you say? We'll need the best we've got, Chief. And I know just the bird. This is the place, Gov. Let's find out what kind of sick, twisted crime we're dealing with there. You know, Gov, from anyone else that would be an insult, but from you, it's a shrewd commentary on the social fabric that makes up this particular neighbourhood.
What involvement did Terry have with the script?
Terry would write a number of monologues for my character,
fairly regularly to begin with, and then with an ever more increasing frequency, to the point where it was almost 3 per episode. And these monologues would be very similar in nature in that they would focus a lot on Terry's backstory, but then they would differ in the sense they would focus on his detective record, the number of crimes he'd solved, how important he was to the force, his education, even his ancestry would become a major theme in an episode. Which I always felt was odd because normally a detective procedural show is much more about the procedure, much more about the crime and solving it. These episodes seem to very much be about Insepctor the Toucan, and to a lesser extent to about Terry himself.
Really?
And what I assume is his own insecurities. The eagle-eyed viewer, in fact, will probably be able to detect a number of inconsistencies between the stories. I believe he is the character. Seems to have studied at well over 45 different universities over the course of the show. And I don't think anyone was willing to pull him up on it. And certainly, if anyone refused to go through with the monologues that he'd written specifically for their characters about Insepctor the Toucan, they would certainly be fired and never been allowed to work on a Terry production ever again. While this may have seemed a bonus in retrospect, at the time it was quite scary.
I see, interesting.
He's just that kind of bird, Mrs. Hollingsworth. Did you know he went to Oxford and Cambridge and got kicked out of both for knowing more than his professors? Such was his mental acuity. His methods seemed too much like modern witchcraft. Such is the way with science ahead of its time. In his first term at the Sorbonne, he reinvented both the Socratic and the scientific method. He's a genius, that Terry, and a loss to the Scotland Yard.
There was a lot more to Terry's education speech when we shot the thing, but thankfully the BBC told Terry that you have to cut it down because no one cares. The only person who did care, of course, was the person who wrote the little monologue. That was Terry. And I think that was born out of his insecurity of not having gone to any university at all. But no, I tell a lie. He was at, what is the place? Wolverhampton as a mascot for their, I think, rugby team. But unfortunately, he only did it for 2 matches because then they asked him to leave because of his chants. They were too vulgar. In your own view, how might you describe the average Insepctor the Toucan viewer?
Gov. It's exquisite. The interplay between light and dark. The movement of the lines as they quite gently dance across the canvas. It's remarkable. The colours recall an early Caravaggio in its Baroque period. Such is the deftness of your brushwork. And it has all the earthly sensuality of the Impressionists. And when I first saw it, I was reminded, transported to the early Matisse. but that belies its surrealist edge, evocative of Dali's absurdist dreamscapes, or Magritte's men in suits. And I'm not a cultured man, Gov, but even a layman such as I can see that this is the work of a true artist.
A master of the fall. So I suppose you are wondering why we have inserted a scene in this episode about Terry's artwork and his Inspector Le Toucan's supposed skills as an artist. What many people don't know is during this episode, the paintings that you see of Toucan in the Admiral's hat up top of skull, while gaudy, it is also the work by Terry himself. And the reason why he asked us to include it into the episode is because he actually had an exhibition going on at the time in a tiny gallery, not in Soho, not Mayfair, Clapham. So it was in Clapham.
It's alright, Gov, I can take it. You warned me. You know, Gov, I've been in the job 30 years and I've seen a lot of weird stuff, but there are some things my stomach can never get used to. I'm gonna step outside, Gov.
So what was it like to really work with Terry the Toucan? Well, of course, with any television show with a star as provocative as Terry, you are going to inevitably attract the kind of ambulance chasers and, genuine sexual harassment suits that would bring the plagiarism or unpaid. Did Terry ever peck you? And I'm sorry if this is a personal question, but I feel like our viewers would want to know. Yes, he did, actually, a number of times. Sometimes I was being deliberately provocative, but most of the times I had transgressed on whatever his cause du jour happened to be in fashion, and he believed that he was throwing himself headlong into that day, that week. One day it was his veganism, and I had brought in a bacon sandwich. I was not planning to share said bacon sandwich with him, but he was still offended that I had not asked in the intervening 24 hours whether he had become a vegan in those 24 hours, and having not asked, not thought that I shouldn't bring a vegan transgressing meal onto the set of production.
No. What a way to go. right in the middle of bridge. The most innocent of sports to cover up any misdeeds. But how, Gov? How? But it seems like the only clue that we've got to go on are these hand-shaped neck wounds. You flatter me, Gov. You flatter me, but it is not I who cracked this case, but you. Of course, it's all so obvious now. But wait, Gov. What does this have to do with Gerald?
Sorry.
So working with Terry was absolutely awful, in all senses of the word. I did 4-5 years of drama school and came out and offered a job in an up-and-coming detective show, they said, and I thought I'd take it. What I didn't know is that Terry would resent my training and have me put on an awful accent. I'm not even sure what the accent is supposed to be. I'm fairly sure I slip out of it at times because it's not my forte. However, Terry insisted that the detective just not sound more impressive or more authoritarian than the lead character, which I wasn't actually told was going to be Terry the Toucan. I had signed up believing that it was going to be a standard Misfits comedy of two very different detectives being placed next to one another and learning to work through their differences. I never learned to work through my differences with Inspector the Toucan.
Gov, I'm getting calls from an eye to call it a day and pack it up and go home. How you doing? Tell me you've cracked it. That's fantastic news, Gov. Who did it? No, Gov, we ain't got time for the theatrics. You might get yourself killed or worse. At least wear the Kevlar vest, Gov. You're too valuable to us at the Met and across the globe. Who knows with what kind of heat these ponces are packing. Oh, your mind's made up, Gov. You're set on it.
Bow ties, vinyl, suspenders, the Bee Gees, Inspector the Toucan. These so-called hipsters of today are discovering the pastimes of yesterday. And one of these is Terry the Toucan's Inspector the Toucan. A popular show made even more popular by a renaissance in millennial viewing figures. Is it satire? Is it serious? Let's find out, shall we? Is Terry popular in France? Is his fame international in that
And I thought this interview was going to be boring. No, they do not like Terry in France.
Musician, television actor, film actor, others. Terry the Toucan has pursued a number of opportunities, not all of them successful, in fact very few. And what we see and learn from all of these is that with each endeavour, Terry puts a little more of himself into each one. With Insepctor the Toucan, we come very close to seeing the purest of Terrys that we've seen in a very long while. Some say that Insepctor the Toucan harkens back to an era of fiction where, almost pulp fiction, it might be described as. Stories so bad that they almost deserve to be pulped.